When you hear the phrase placebo effect, what pops into your head? For pretty much all of us, it's the sugar pill, right? A fake treatment, something inert that somehow magically makes us feel better. We kind of think of it as a trick, a little quirk of the mind that only works because we've been fooled. It's so easy to just dismiss it as being all in your head. But what if that phrase isn't a dismissal at all? What if it's actually a clue? What if the real power of the placebo has nothing to do with deception and everything to do with engaging our minds as an active partner in healing? Well, today we're going to tear down that old story and build a new one based on some absolutely fascinating research.
Okay, let's get into it. We're going to walk through this in 6 steps. First, we'll tackle that core idea, the deception assumption. Then, we'll look at a study that asks a weird question: when is more not better? That's going to lead us to the incredible idea of a personalized placebo. And from there, believe me, things get really strange. With the open-label paradox, what happens when you know it's a placebo? The answer, it seems, is all about activating belief. And that brings us to the grand finale, where we rethink the whole thing as the story is medicine.
All right, so let's start at the very beginning, with the idea that has pretty much defined everything we think we know about this topic, the deception assumption. This is the foundation, the bedrock of how we've always understood and, often misunderstood the placebo effect.
So, the official definition sounds pretty simple. A placebo effect is a good health outcome that comes from your anticipation that something is going to help. The pill, the cream, it has no active ingredients. For decades, the entire medical world has basically run on the belief that its power comes from the patient being mistaken, believing that a fake thing is a real active drug. The whole magic trick depends on the person in the audience, the patient, not knowing how it's done. This idea is so powerful, it's the whole basis for the gold standard in clinical trials, the double-blind placebo-controlled study.
But here it is. Here's the question that's going to drive this whole explainer today. Is that really it? Is the secret ingredient just a clever, well-meaning lie? Or is there something much deeper? Something way more powerful going on that we've just completely missed because we've been so focused on the deception part of the story?
To even begin to answer that, we've got to look at our first piece of evidence, a really cool study from 2019 in Frontiers in Psychiatry. The researchers basically decided to put the most logical, most intuitive assumption of that old deception model to the test.
And that assumption is it's pure logic, right? If the whole effect is driven by positive expectation, then if you just crank that expectation up to 11, you should get the biggest placebo effect possible. It makes perfect sense. If you tell someone a cream will reduce their pain a little, that's one thing. But if you tell them it's going to completely wipe out their pain, well, that should be way better. More positive expectation should equal more pain relief. Simple.
So to see if this was true, they set up this really clever 3-day experiment. They brought in 120 healthy people and gave them mild but definitely painful electrical zaps on their forearms. Then they split them up. The no expectancy group was told the cream they were getting was totally useless. The low expectation group was told the cream would help a bit but not get rid of the pain completely. And then the high expectancy group, they got the ultimate promise. This cream will make the pain disappear. And get this is the really crucial part. They didn't just tell them this. Over the first 2 days, they actually faked the pain levels to match the story, conditioning them to really truly believe it. These expectations were rock solid.
So the stage was set. On that final day, everybody got the same painful stimulus and the exact same useless cream. Now, according to the old model, the results should have been a perfect staircase, right? The high expectancy group feeling awesome, the low group feeling okay, and the no group feeling nothing. So, was that what they found? Did the biggest promise deliver the biggest result?
Nope, not even close. That simple, intuitive, more is better idea it completely fell apart. The results showed that the link between what you expect and what you feel isn't some simple dial you can just turn up. It was actually deeply and fascinatingly connected to who the person was. The effect wasn't universal, it was personal.
And this, right here, is our first huge aha moment. This is the idea of a personalized placebo. It turns out the best level of expectation isn't some fixed target. It's a moving target, and where it lands depends entirely on the individual. One size absolutely does not fit all.
Okay, so check out these graphs, because this is where it gets really wild. Look at the one on the left. It splits the results by gender. The blue line is women, the red line is men. You can see right away this is not a simple story. Now look at the graph on the right. This one splits people based on how optimistic they are in life. Again, you see these lines just crossing and going in totally different directions. The old model just has no way to explain this.
Let's really break down what we're seeing here, because the details are just incredible. For women, the biggest drop in pain intensity didn't come from the highest expectation. It came from the low one, the more modest suggestion. But for men, the traditional model worked just fine. High expectation was the best. And it gets even crazier. When they looked at pain unpleasantness, which is the emotional, I hate this part of pain, they found that for really optimistic people, a low expectation worked best. For people who weren't very anxious, a high expectation was better. It's this complex web of interactions, and personality is the thing pulling all the strings.
So the huge takeaway from this first study is just, it's revolutionary. The goal isn't to just pump a patient's hopes up as high as they can go. Actually, for some people, an unrealistically high expectation might totally backfire, maybe because it just feels unbelievable. To really use the placebo effect, you have to find the right expectation for the person. It's about finding that sweet spot, the right story for the right individual. But this still leaves a giant question on the table. Does the patient still need to be in the dark?
And that leads us to the next and maybe the most mind-bending part of this whole thing, the open label paradox. This tackles that deception assumption head-on. It asks a simple, almost ridiculous question. What happens if you are completely honest with the patient? What if you tell them, hey, this is a placebo, but it might still work?
So for this, we're going to look at a second study, also from 2019, in the journal Health Psychology. They designed this brilliant experiment in honesty. They gave people a mild allergic reaction on their arm. Then they had 4 groups, each one adding a new layer. Group 1, the control, just got a nice supportive chat with the provider. Group 2 also got a medical ritual. The provider put a cream on them, but told them straight up, this is a placebo. It has no active ingredients. Group 3 got all that plus a positive suggestion, like your rash will now start to get better. And Group 4 got the whole package plus a detailed scientific explanation for why placebos can actually work.
Okay, so here's the plot twist in our little science story. The researchers ran the experiment, they measured the allergic reactions, and nothing. It was a complete wash. On average, adding the honest placebo cream, adding the positive words, even adding the cool science explanation, none of it worked any better than just having a nice conversation. It looked like a total dead end. It seemed to prove that, yeah, without the trick, the placebo is powerless.
But the researchers had a hunch. They felt like something else was going on, that just averaging everyone's results together was hiding the real story. They suspected there was a hidden variable, a crucial piece of the puzzle that they hadn't seen yet.
And this was the light bulb moment. They started to wonder, what if the whole point of that scientific explanation wasn't to convince someone who is skeptical? What if its real job was to give permission to someone who was already a believer? What if it didn't create a new belief in placebos from scratch, but instead it just activated a belief that was already there, just sitting dormant inside the person's mind?
So they went back to the data. But this time, they split people up based on how much they believed in placebos before the experiment even started. And bam, there it was. This chart shows it perfectly. For people who started with a low belief in placebos, you can see on that first bar, the rationale did nothing. But for those who already had a strong belief, look at that second bar. For them, the whole package, the ritual, the expectation, and the scientific rationale, it produced a significant, measurable, real-world reduction in their allergic reaction. The rationale didn't convince them of anything new, it just unlocked the power of a belief they already had.
The study's authors just nailed it in their conclusion. They said they had revealed patient beliefs as a hidden variable. It wasn't about the provider's story alone. It was about the incredible interaction between what the provider said and the patient's own internal story. Deception wasn't the key at all. Honesty could work, but only if it was speaking to a mind that was already open to the message.
So let's put it all together. What do these 2 studies tell us? What does this all mean for how we think about the placebo effect? It means we need to throw out the old definition. We need a radical rewrite, moving away from this simple idea of a trick and towards something way more profound and, frankly, way more exciting.
I mean, just look at the difference. The old model's mechanism was deception. Its key ingredient was making sure the patient didn't know the secret. The whole goal was to trick the mind. But this new model, the mechanism is belief activation. The key ingredient is the patient's own mindset, their personality, their beliefs. And the goal isn't to trick the mind at all, it's to engage the mind as a willing, active partner in healing.
And why does this matter so much? Because it means the power isn't really in the sugar pill itself, it's in the entire context that surrounds it. It shows us that the relationship between a doctor and a patient, the rituals of care, the stories they share, that's not just fluff, That is a form of medicine. It proves that the narrative of healing, the story we believe, can create actual physical changes in our bodies. The future isn't just about personalizing a drug to your DNA. It might be about personalizing the meaning of the treatment to your mind.
Which leaves us with one last really big question to chew on. The evidence we've looked at today shows that your mindset, when it's engaged in just the right way, can physically calm down your body's allergic reaction. It's a direct, measurable, mind-over-matter effect that works even when you're being totally honest. So, if our beliefs, when they're properly activated, hold that kind of power, what other incredible healing abilities are just sitting inside us waiting to be unlocked? Not by some new pill, but just by the right story, told at the right time, to the right person.